Their work will be remembered as one of the greatest moments of this planet.
Mr. Scout. I know you're still weighing whether to return to Lumen. But the mark I've come to know is happy.
Hello, is anyone there? Is the board on? It's Marquez from Macro...
What you all did was one of the most painful moments in the history of this company.
What the hell?
But the four of you have become known as the face of Severance reform.
Okay, so we're not in trouble?
I don't think so. Milchick said we're famous.
All of us equally, or one of us is like the star?
Now, if you feel that you can't go on.
So what the hell did you guys see up there?
It's not our world up there.
And your life is filled with much confusion.
My Audi's wife died a few years ago. Except the woman is Miss Casey.
So what are you gonna do?
I gotta get her out of here.
Mark, your Annie said she's alive.
This is obscene.
I just want to be sure.
And your world around is coming.
Why did you do this? What is this all about?
Do you know something about Gemma?
Mark, there'll be no honeymoon ending for you.
Their work will be remembered as one of the greatest moments of this planet.
You don't value them. You fear them. We fear no one.
I'm tightening the leash.
If we let this happen to Miss Casey, who's gonna step up when it happens to us?
Now. Goodbye, Marquez.
Wait!
My name is Miss Huang. It's my first day here as deputy manager. Mark W.
Why are you a child?
Because of when I was born.
And welcome all to the Severance Episode 4 live discussion. And what more can we say about Severance Episode 4? This episode by far was definitely the trippiest episode we've seen to date. But I totally understand what the early reviews were saying when they said Episode 4 is going to change the face of Severance going forward. And it really did. Severance took a very dark turn in this episode. And it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out over the rest of the series and how that tone filters into the rest of the series. Or if it's going to be one of those things where we return to the office and it's kind of business as usual. But a lot of stuff happened in this episode, a lot of profound stuff, big revelations, even bigger moments. And boy, do we have a lot to talk about, don't we? Mini Milkshake, welcome.
Yes, we do. This episode was insane. To me, it felt like I was watching maybe like 3 episodes at once. There was so much going on. I had to watch it maybe like 4 times. It was a lot.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too. I watched it 3 times before I even attempted to do my review because I really wanted to, I wanted to listen to all of the stuff that was going on with Kier and Dieter, all the stuff in the book. Like, I really wanted to fully process it as best I could before I really dove in and did my review. And this was probably the most difficult review I've made on this season so far. Like, this episode was difficult to review, like at least in the way that I preferred to review them. But yeah, oh my God, so much stuff happened. It almost felt like a mini movie. It didn't even really feel like an episode of television. It kind of had that film, that kind of feature film feeling to it. In some scenes, I kind of almost felt like I was watching a mini Severance movie, I guess.
Yes. Yes, exactly. It really did feel that way. Um, I'm still amazed. Buckle up, chat, because it's gonna be, we have a billion things to talk about.
Yeah, this was a very crazy one indeed. And yeah, and speaking of the chat, welcome everybody. So glad to have you here on this fine Saturday night evening as we dive into Severance with all of the Sevies. And let's see what we have in attendance, shall we? We got Kiwi Skirt in the house. Getting coffee, then I'm ready. Awesome. Get that coffee. There you go. There you go. We got Pam Jam in the house. Welcome, Pam Jam. Good to see you as well. We got Chris B in the house. Welcome, Chris B. I was so glad for a change of scenery last episode, and that was kind of nice. I mean, Severance does have the kind of same scenery every single episode. Of course, it's set in the corporate setting, so you get some scenes in the outside world with the Audis, but the majority of the show does kind of take place in that same luminescent office where everything is just so perfectly lit. And you pointed this out as well, PM, in terms of how quickly we noticed Helly's hair. She looked like a brunette in this episode. Like she didn't even look like she had red hair, and it was really a big contrast from the bright luminescent lights that they usually film under compared to just being in the regular natural sunlight.
Yes. Yes. And well, you pointed out in your video, explaining the episode, how for the Ennies, this was the first time that they were outside. So they love the change of scenery, I'm guessing. I mean, so many things happened that
Mm,
were not the most positive, but
yep.
and we were talking about this. I didn't notice them being excited to be outside. You would think that they would be so excited to experience weather and to
Mm,
sleep and eat. That was their first meal. They usually only have snacks.
yeah. That's true. Yeah, all they have is these little lumen snacks from the little vending machine. Yeah, that's right. They've never had like proper food before. That's very true. And unfortunately, they got deprived of their very first roasted marshmallow experience, which is just probably the biggest tragedy of the episode. But yeah, I mean, I did get that sense where at least I wish they would have put a little bit more of an emphasis on the kind of sensory overload that the innies would have been experiencing in that setting. I mean, it's one thing for them to get a quick little glimpse of the outside world at night at the end of season one when they have a specific task. They didn't really have time to sightsee. But this was their true first experience, especially during broad daylight as well. So I wish we could have seen just a little bit more of an emphasis on that. I feel like they attempted to do it, like with Mark, like
Hmm.
with Milchick handing Mark the torch, and Mark literally seeing fire for the very first time. All of the innies seeing fire for the very first time. I was hoping that moment would have been a little bit bigger instead of just one kind of line of "Oh, it's beautiful." So yeah, I do wish they would have kind of played up the sensory overload that they would have been in.
Yeah, for sure. And the thing about fire, right? What is it that you do? I mean, I'm guessing first you look at it, it's beautiful, but then you want to touch it. So it was all of these like emotions that they were going through, but they didn't really show us. They were kind of acting so cool about it, almost like they were always
Mm,
outside. And that's what didn't like fit in with what we know about the Indies. However, there was so much going on in the episode that if they spent a lot of time just going through the Indies, like just processing nature, it
mhm.
would have
Yeah.
been super long. And the marshmallows, oh my God, the marshmallows. I was so heartbroken for Mini Milkshake, which, by the way, I love that you named Miss Huang Mini Milkshake because she was a total mini milkshake. Super
Total mini
cute.
milkshake. Yeah. It was
Total
kind of
mini
funny.
milkshake.
And I thought, it's interesting because, they had to you have Milchick and Mini Milchick kind of wearing similar outfits that the MDR team is, but of course they have to set themselves aside. They have to kind of, they're the managers, these are the employees, so they have to kind of one up them and put like these super fresh white outfits on, where they have to just look a little bit better than the innies, which they did. I mean, Milchick looked
Mhm.
fresh in this episode. He looked great. And so did Little Mini Milkshake. Again, she was a mini freaking milkshake in this episode, and it was pretty
Yeah.
funny to see.
I
Pretty
love
funny to
that. Yeah,
see.
and people are loving it. In your video, people are loving the mini milkshake, Miss Huang. So I think from now on, that's gonna be her name. That's what I'm gonna call her. But talking
Oh,
about
me
Miss
too.
Huang, you actually had mentioned this in the last live that we did about how even though they say that she is not severed, she acts a
Mhm.
lot like she is severed. And when they first arrive, she says, it's pretty cool, right? Like she's
Yeah,
really kind of like astounded and also super like excited to be there. And when she has to throw the marshmallows away, she just stares at them. Like you
I
could tell
know.
she wanted the marshmallows. It was so sad.
Yeah, she probably wanted one too. Absolutely. I mean, it's just so cruel to just toss those freaking those marshmallows in the fire like that. Man, ah, man. And of course, we had the big reveal that Helena was posing as Helly the entire time, which was a pretty big fan theory, going on in this season already. But in this episode, we actually get it 100% confirmed. And Pam Jam brings up, do you think Helena will try to get close to Audi Mark? She seems to love him. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I almost feel like she likes any Mark a little bit better. But
Hmm.
there was a moment in that episode where right after, when they're in the tent, right after Helena essentially kind of takes advantage of Mark in so many ways, you hear Helena, pretending to be Helly, saying, I didn't like who I was on the outside. And those words did seem like they were genuinely coming from Helena. Like Helena probably doesn't like her life on the outside. I think she genuinely does want to be a little bit more like Helly. She does seem a little bit miserable. She was envious of Helly and Mark's kind of relationship right when she saw it on the surveillance camera. It's almost like she wanted that for herself, really wanted that for herself, and wasn't just playing in that scene. Like she really doesn't like her outside life.
Oh, for sure. Because there was no need to say that. It was just her and
Yeah.
Mark. And he wasn't asking a lot of questions. I mean, he said any. He kind of did ask her, like when she said, I didn't like who I was on the outside. I was ashamed.
Mm,
He's like, who were you? But then she doesn't answer, and he's just happy to be there. So he doesn't continue asking anything. She didn't
yeah.
need to give him any sort of explanation. She did. Um, and the thing about Pam Jam, and we have been talking about this in the Discord, the thing about Elena getting with Mark is that it is so heartbreaking because Helly despises Elena so
Oh,
much. Like that is her
man.
nemesis. And she loves any Mark. And he basically slept with her nemesis, which
Yeah.
now becomes very complicated.
Ugh, so complicated. It's going to get messy. I mean, it's messy on all fronts when you really look at it. And yeah, I mean, you start to wonder that when the real Helly does come back. Well, now that the real Helly is back, and when she finds out everything that happened, which I imagine she probably will. I mean, is there going to be a part of her that might be a little disappointed in Mark that he couldn't tell the difference, that he couldn't tell this was really her? Maybe. I don't know. I mean, it's it's tough. It's a sticky situation. It's messed up. It is so messed up.
Oh yeah.
Ah, my God. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. What an
I mean, I
episode.
just kept thinking, I know that there's so much going on, right? But I always just think about safety. And my worry, of course, I watched it 4 times. My worry was the heater. They were like in the tent and they had a huge heater right at the front. And Mark has really long hair and Elena has really long hair. And I just kept thinking, like, you guys, scoot over, you're gonna get burnt. Like your hair's gonna get set on fire, and then the whole tent is just gonna go up in flames. Like they were so
Oh,
close to that heater.
yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, they really were. And those heaters give off some major heat. Like, yeah, that is no bueno. That can really cause a fire super fast. Um, I mean, the location was beautiful. I mean, like where they filmed on location, just in the middle of the wilderness, and apparently they couldn't really touch any of the wilderness. They had to leave everything just completely intact. And they talked about how they had to build ramps, like giant ramps, to get all of the equipment over the tree line because they couldn't touch the trees at all. It was, I mean, it's an incredibly tough location to film in, especially a show like this when they're so used to kind of filming everything on a set, on a soundstage, in their kind of pre-built hallways and stuff like that. Like this is just completely outside of all of their comfort zone. But they nailed it. I think they nailed it so well. And I mean, what can you say about John Turturro's performance in this episode? The guy was the
Mm.
just MVP of the season so far. I mean, I'm gonna miss Irving. I must say, Irving was so badass in this episode.
He was amazing in this episode, an icon, a complete and total icon. His behavior, I love that he's fancy. We all know that. He has that amazing accent that I love. But
Yeah,
his behavior, he was really just way different than the Irving that we know. He was very much in charge. He was very much protective. Like you mentioned this
yeah.
in your video, how he was the parent and he really
It felt
was
like that.
acting.
Mm,
Yeah. And the way he was talking to the other innies was with that authority, which he doesn't usually, especially to Mark, because Mark is his boss.
true, very true. Yeah, that's right. Mark's his boss at the end of the day. But I have always liked that aspect of Irving where he knows he's the like even in season one, like he says, Mark, I should have used better judgment as the senior refiner. It's like he knows he's the senior guy. He's been around, even though Mark's his boss, he's been around the longest. And yeah, he did kind of step into that kind of parent role in this episode where he genuinely was kind of looking out for Mark and Dylan and trying to kind of keep
Mhm.
them away from Helly because he knew something was off from her right from the very beginning. And I love how John Turturro explains it. He did an interview just talking about this episode in particular, and he talks about how why he was so suspicious of Helly the whole time. And for
Mhm.
some reason, he just couldn't get the Night Gardener line out of his head, which of course he brings up 2 or 3 times in this episode alone. He's like, he confronts her about it at the fireplace in the tent at the end.
Mhm.
Tell us about this Night Gardener. Did he wear a vest, a luminescent vest? And he's
A
just so
luminescent
good.
vest.
He was just so good. And it was interesting to hear him describe why that one line kind of stood out to him so much. And the way John Turturro describes it, he says that was his Audi's training kicking in for his innie. His Audi's training is exactly how he described it. So whatever Irving does, whatever the Audi Irving does, he's a bit of a badass, I imagine. I don't know if he's ex-military or something along those lines, or I know you've talked about him
Mhm.
potentially already being like high ranking in the rebellion, which I could totally see being the case. But the way
Mhm.
he attributes him being so suspicious of Helly was it's his Audi's training kind of kicking in just subconsciously. So that's what I want to learn next. I mean, it seems like any Irving we might not see again probably for a while. I don't think we've seen the last of him. And that's been a question like, is any Irving gone from the show entirely or will he ever come back? I get the feeling we haven't seen the full end of any Irving, but I
Mhm.
do think we're going to learn a little bit more about Audi Irving now, or at least I hope we do, and whatever kind of training he has that made him so suspicious of Helly, and which kind of led him
Yeah.
to the right course of action, really.
Yeah. And, now that you mention it, not only does he have the training to notice suspicious things about Helly, but he was waterboarding her and he was doing an amazing job at it. Like he was a pro at it. So when I think about like training, it's like maybe he was in some sort of like combat situation where these
Yep.
are things that he did. He took charge, and that's what he was doing, really. He was taking charge. Also, when he mentions we should eat the dead seal, right? Like he thinks we should eat it. That's kind of like training, right? Like if you are in the land, you think of
In the
food,
wilderness.
water, shelter. Yes. And
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. No, I mean, it is. I mean, yeah, maybe that's his training kind of peeking through as well. Because, yeah, I mean, someone like Irving, if he does have that kind of training and he comes upon an animal, it's like his first instinct is to eat it, so we don't starve. And as nasty as it is a survival skill. It's like his natural survival instincts kind of peeking out to the surface without him even really thinking about doing it. It just kind of coming to him. So
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, I really want to learn a lot more about Audi Irving now. I want to learn who is this guy really? What training does he have? Like what is he really involved in? And hopefully we will learn a little bit more about his Audi. But I'm gonna miss any Irving. I gotta say, he was a just fascinating in this episode, and the performance was just so good. I feel like John Turturro's performance in this episode was probably the best acting performance I've seen on Severance yet. Like, he absolutely killed this episode. Great last episode for him to have, if that is the case. But yeah, I mean, I just can't get over it enough. And even some of the smaller things, like at the very end when he's kind of standing down Milchick face to face, and he's just not backing down, and you see him just give that little slight smirk when he's face to face with him, like, yeah, motherfucker, I won. It's so good. It was so good.
Yes, that's like my favorite scene now.
Yeah.
I 100% agree. Out of all Severance episodes, season 1, season 2, that scene of him waterboarding Elena and then finally coming to terms, because he was prepared. He did that on purpose. He called I love that picture. He called for for Mr. Milkshake, right? Like, Mr. Milkshake, I'm gonna
Mr. Milchick.
what did he say? I'm gonna kill her. I'm gonna kill her, Mr. Milkshake.
It was so
So he
good.
was
Like
like so prepared.
yeah. He was so ready, and you could tell he knew that there was going to be consequences to this, and I feel like he gladly accepted them wholeheartedly. And it's funny because it seems like he got the courage to have this ultimate confrontation just after he finishes taming his own temper of woe and the weird dream sequence that he has, where he has to kind of confront his sadness for Bert, which we even see Bert in the scene. It's him kind of him taming woe in that dream sequence was basically him moving past, or at least getting over, his sadness for Bert in order to take this next step here, which was to expose Helena. And it was just, he played it so well, so well. And I love I love when he looks up at him after Helena breaks character and she says, "Do it, Seth." He's like, "Yes, do it, Seth." The way he says Seth had me dying laughing. It was so funny. Ah,
So
so good.
mocking. So mocking. And usually it's very shocking because he is usually so respectful. He's
Yep.
so respectful and follows protocol. So for him to talk to Milkshake in that manner, like, "Do it, Seth," it's so mocking. Like, he was just 100% ready to embrace the fact that the end was coming. And you and I talked about this. He didn't want to stay in the office. Dylan had to convince him to stay in the office. He said, "I just want the pain to stop." So when I think
Yes.
about Wu's hollow, is that's what he was looking for, to be hollow of all pain, of all Wu. And
Yeah.
so he used this opportunity where he was alive to give somebody else an opportunity to be happy, like Hallie and Mark, an opportunity to live. And I just thought it was like amazing because yeah, he tamed the temper, and now that he has reached that Milkshake says the eternal darkness, he is no longer in pain. He is no longer suffering. So he really is Wu's hollow.
He is. It really is the perfect reflection of the title itself. Absolutely, he is. Hollow now. He kind of got past that sadness for Bert in order to make this final sacrifice, knowing that he would be stepping into the nothingness afterwards. And like you said, he was tired. We saw him wanting to give up very early on in the beginning of season 2, like you mentioned, and we get that great moment between him and Dylan where Dylan's, just pure friendship for Irving kind of brings him back off the ledge for, momentarily. But you can tell that this part of Irving was still in him the whole time, where there's a small part of him that did kind of always just wanted it to end. He wanted the sadness to end. He didn't want to keep feeling this. And man, he really made the best of using his last moments to put on the just performance of his lifetime, and of course bringing back Kelly. And I love the contrast we see in this scene when he is waterboarding her. You see how rough he's being with Helena, he's being so rough with her, just slamming her into the water over and over and over again. Yet as soon as she switches back over to Helly, he just grabs her and holds her close. You know what I mean? Like you see the contrast instantly. It's almost like he instantly knew that she was Helly in this moment. Before, like as he's pulling her out of the water, he's already holding her close, and it's
Yeah.
like he already knew. Okay, Helly's back now. I'm so sorry, Helly. You could tell he felt bad. He didn't want to have to do
Yeah.
this for Helly, but it was just a really good contrast, and you could tell how much Irving really does care about his coworkers.
Hmm. Yeah, and it was out of character. He always knew that that was Elena. It was out of character for him to not want Mark to talk to Holly. He
Yeah,
knows that they are in love, and so when he was so upset about them talking to each other, it really goes back to what you said. He was upset because he knew, like, stay away from her. That is not Helly. He brought
yeah.
her back, and he has always been so kind to Helly.
Hmm.
Like when she first did all of her macro data refinement, and he says to the group, maybe we should stand in back of her and cheer to like give her some motivation. He was always so sweet to Hallie. But the contrast, you speak of the contrast. Right before this episode at nighttime, there was you love the cinematography of the show, and I do too. But
Love
there
it.
was a
Yeah.
beautiful contrast where Irving was lost in the woods or forest, and everything was blue and cold, and he's like laying down in a rock. Everything is blue, cold, dark, and at the same time they kept going back and forth between him being in the dark and in the cold, and Elena and Mark being
Yeah.
in bright red light in the
Oh
warmth.
yes.
At the time, we didn't know that that was Elena, but the contrast was they are in love. They're together in the warm embrace of being in love and together. And because he no longer has birth, he's out in the cold, in the pain, in the nothingness. And they kept going back between those two. I thought that that was the juxtaposition was amazing.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I mean, I didn't even notice it at the time, but yeah, I mean, you're right. We go back and forth between just two completely polar opposite contrasts. It's almost like, from ice to fire in a sense. And yeah, you see Irving out there getting ready to sleep on this freaking rock, almost freezing to death, and you see Helena and Mark, and just in the warm embrace. It's and then of course the
Oh God.
reintegration kicks in a little bit, and then Gemma shows up and gets super fucking weird. Wouldn't be Severance if it wasn't weird on top of weird at this point. But
Yeah.
man, and that was one thing coming off of episode 3, where episode 3 ends with like a pretty big plot point, a pretty big progression in the story with Mark already undergoing integration, which I don't think any of us were hoping would think it was going to happen that soon. I had a feeling it was going to reintegrate at some point, just based on some of the hints we see in the intro sequence. But I did not have it happening as early as episode 3. And to see that happen at the end of episode 3, I was fully going into this episode expecting it to be, heavily revolved around the reintegration process. But clearly, it's one of those things that's much more gradual. It's not like you just flip the switch on his brain and all of a sudden they're completely merged. It seems like it's something that will gradually happen over time, because he is capable
Mhm.
of only being his innie still, even though the reintegration process has already started. So
Yeah.
I imagine episode 5 will probably pick up much more and diving a little bit deeper into his reintegration, I bet.
Hmm. And I mean, I thought it was brilliant that they made the overlap happen in this exact moment, because it
Mm,
allowed the Audi Mark to know that something had transpired with
yes.
Elena. So he's going to be aware of what Elena did. And any Mark, obviously, he knows what happened. And now that he knows that that's Elena, he's going to have to deal with the consequences of that, right? But I think
Yeah.
it's great that they both know, because what Elena did was so, I mean, I understand why she did it. She explains it as, she's lonely, whatever. I think that what she was saying to Irving of he's lonely because he will never see Bert again was more like her, somebody who
Hmm.
understands loneliness.
Yeah.
So while I understand that, what she did was taking consent away from so many people,
Yeah.
so many people.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because yeah, Audi Mark has, no say in what's going on. Helly, of course, has no say in what's going on here, and even Any Mark is getting deceived in and of himself as well, because he's believing he's having this experience with Helly, not knowing it is Helena,
Mhm.
which I imagine he wouldn't have done if he didn't know this was Helena. So yeah, she took consent away from three people in one fell swoop. It does get a little
Yeah.
messy for sure. Yeah. Ah, what an
Oh
episode!
yeah.
Holy fuck!
I
What
mean,
an
it's
episode!
insane. But any Mark knows how much Helly hates Elena. Like any
Yes.
Mark knows that. He knows that for sure. He would never have done that. He would never have betrayed her in that manner. And
Yeah.
now, I mean, what's done is done, right? Um, it's
Yeah.
gonna get so complicated. Also, you guys were all right, chat. You guys said that that was Helena. I didn't want to believe
Yeah.
it, and it was
Me
Helena. So
neither.
congratulations
Oh.
to the chat.
Yeah, I really didn't want it to be Helena. Like I really wanted it to be Helly. But by the time this episode came around, it was like okay, it's starting to get a little obvious that okay, shit, it's not Helly, and I
Hmm.
was a little disappointed. I did want it to be Helly, but I totally understand why a lot of people were kind of going the Helena route. There were some interesting signs pointing to this maybe not being her, from the elevator ding at the very beginning of the season to her acting strange in some scenes that was a little kind of out of character for something Helly might do. I get
Hmm.
why people picked up on it. I was just really hoping it was going to be Helly, but it was an interesting twist, and it does add some very complicated stuff to the narrative, if nothing else. Like this is
Hmm.
like, how do you untangle this web now? How do how does any Mark reconcile with this? How does Audi Mark reconcile with this? How does Helly reconcile with this? What happens if, God forbid, she conceives for some reason? Like this could have
Oh,
really
oh
lasting
God.
consequences on the show.
Yeah, so
Messy.
I have actually seen I mean, of course, once we see a moment where something like this has happened, people have been intimate together, the next step that a lot of people, and I have seen it on your Discord, um, is is there going to be a baby? And like, what was the purpose of her doing this, right?
Hmm.
Because you and I talked about this, she orchestrated it. It seems to me that she orchestrated the entire event, because I'm
Yeah,
sure that they're not the only Ennies that have ever expressed interest of the outside world. I mean, we
yeah,
met some of them and they were talking about like the wind, being super excited about the outside. So I'm sure other Ennies have expressed an interest, but what was so special about them was that Elena wanted to get Mark alone at nighttime away from the office.
yes. Yes, and I totally agree with you. I think you're 100% spot on. I do think this was Helena who orchestrated this entire thing, because just the very act of showing these severed employees outside goes against everything that Lumen stands for. Lumen specifically doesn't have any windows. They can't see the outside
Hmm.
world. There's a reason why Lumen doesn't want their severed employees to see the outside world, because they don't want them to long for something more than the job that they are given. They're trying to create the perfect employee at the end of the day. So the very fact of Lumen sending them on this trip was incredibly sus to begin with. It just, again, it kind of goes against everything Lumen stands for and how they want their employees to react and to behave. So yeah, I totally agree. I think you're spot on. I think this was Helena orchestrating this entire thing just
Hmm.
to get close to Mark, for sure.
Yeah,
Seems like she
she
genuinely
didn't want
likes him.
her dad, right, to see what she's doing. I'm imagining the board and her father are watching all of the cameras at all times. So
Yeah, it's how do you get around that? This is the only way, I guess. At the end of the day, you kind of concoct this whole Ortbo experience, and get him out in the wilderness to make your move on him. It's super devious. It's super
oh,
devious from start to finish. Yeah, man, what an episode! What a crazy episode! And I really like how they dove a little bit deeper into the four tempers, and how, talking about how Kier first tamed the temper of woe, and, kind of severing his kind of connection to his brother, And we see Irving kind of doing the same thing here. Irving severing this connection, or at least confronting his sadness over Bert and confronting his own woe. And we talk a little bit about this in the video that I uploaded this morning, but I'm starting to think that we're seeing four repeated over and over and over again for a very specific reason. Four tempers, four MDR workers. Now that we have seen Irving tame the temper of woe, we know that there are still three tempers remaining: frolic, malice, and dread. And of course, there are three innies remaining. So I get the feeling that we're probably going to see this continue, where every single one of the innies are going to have to confront their own temper at some point during the season. Irving tamed woe. Now that leaves Mark, Helly, and Dylan each to have to tame one of the three remaining tempers that are left. I feel like that's where it's going for some reason.
Genius. I have to say genius. I saw that in your video and I was like, "Oh my god, that's right." And they also said it's going to be 2 days, so they still have one more day for them to go through this journey, and the next story is the thieving nanny. So I'm wondering, when you
Yes.
mentioned that, I started thinking, who would be what, right? Like, who is going to have to come to terms with malice? Do you
Yeah.
have any ideas of like who might apply to each of the tempers?
I think Helly has got to be Malice, just for the sheer malice she holds for Helena, and how that's going to even be multiplied after this. So I could totally see Helly having to tame Malice at some point, which of course would leave Dread, I think, for Mark. Mark kind of confronting the dread of losing his wife, and leaving Frolic for Dylan, essentially. Um, I don't know. I mean, I feel like the only one that really fits is Helly, kind of, in Malice, because of just because of the dynamic between her and Helena. But it really
Yeah,
could go any way. I mean, who knows? I guess.
that's true. It really could go any way. I definitely like that one. For Dylan, I agree with the one that you said, but I feel like for him it could also be Dread, because
Yeah,
he
could be.
has to come to terms with the fact that he is not who he thinks that he is, that he's actually the
True.
opposite, that he's not
True.
responsible, that even though his innie wanted to know about his family and says like, "I'll make you guys proud," the actual version of him does, I mean, he's not doing a good job at taking care of his family. So dreading, he used to daydream about what his outside life was like. He
Yeah.
used to daydream like beautiful things about muscle shows and like success. So the dread of coming to terms with the fact that you're just average or below average or not very good at what you're supposed to be doing. And then for Mark, Frolic, I thought maybe that might fit a little bit because Mark
Maybe.
is so happy. The any Mark, we always see him smiling. He's
Yeah.
always like has a big smile. He's like flirting with Helly or Elena, whichever one of the two. He's going around the hallways, right? Just causing trouble. And he's always happy, the indie mark version. So maybe he's gonna have to come to terms with um that something bad just happened and that happiness is might be gone.
Maybe it could be. And I like the idea, like you mentioned, of Dylan. Kind of confronting that his Audi wasn't everything that he hoped he would be. He pictured his Audi being this kind of, muscle man doing these muscle man shows, and he finds out that his Audi's a bit of a deadbeat, a bit of a a screw up who can't really hold down a job. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how these other tempers kind of play out, and who's going to tame what, and how they're going to be physically manifested as well. I mean, we saw the manifestation of woe, of course, which is the kind of the gauntly bride. But what are the other three going to look like when they manifest? And is it going to happen in a similar manner, where they each have to tame a temper in a dream-like state? Maybe, who knows? But yeah, I don't know. It's heading into some interesting places. I like what they are doing with the four tempers, and again, something about the number four tempers, four MDR employees, and I'm starting to think that there's even probably four board members, only four board
Mm.
members. The board, of course, is incredibly mysterious. We know practically nothing about it. There's a lot of good fan theories out there about the board potentially not even being comprised of people, just being comprised of AIs, or of Kier Egan's kind of disembodied consciousness. He's the one running the board. I know that theory's running around out there. There's some interesting theories. But after this, I'm starting to think that the board is comprised of just 4 people, and each one representing a different temper. Because we have already seen one of the potential board members is the manifestation of Frolic. We see the Frolic tattoo right on his hand, and he's keeping track on Audi Mark and his sister in the diner. We see him at the beginning of season 2 after Helena kind of gets taken over by Helly during the fetid moppet scene. So I'm starting to wonder if there are 4 different board members and each one of them are a representation of a different temper, and we've only met Frolic up until this point.
I love that. I love that because it would make sense with the tattoo. Why focus in on the tattoo? And you said this in
Why
your
show
video,
us?
but
Yeah,
why if it's not important, right?
yeah,
So I 100% agree. I think that it's physical people. The board is physical people, and they're all going to have a tattoo representing who they are. Now, what's really interesting is that you showed us a clip last week where Frolic, Mr. Frolic, the one that has that tattoo, is slamming Mark against the wall.
yes, that's right. That's
So
right.
if Mark is from, maybe that is, and he was at the diner, right, listening to the conversation he was having with his sister. So
Yeah,
maybe the temper of Frolic does pertain to Mark. Hence why this specific board member is so like in Mark's business.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, maybe Mark is meant to kind of tame Frolic after all, and yeah, that scene always kind of struck me as super interesting, where you have this giant board member just slamming, any Mark up against the wall. Could that very scene be Mark, confronting the temper of Frolic, and hopefully he, finds a way to, pass the test? But yeah, I could totally see that. I could totally see Mark being Frolic, and then Dylan being Dread, and then Malice being
Mhm.
Helly. I could totally see that being the case. But yeah, I like where they're going with these tempers and how we're seeing them being confronted even by our innies at this point. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But yeah, like you mentioned, why show us the tattoo of Frolic on his hand if we weren't obviously we were meant to see it, but why show us that if he's not one of the representations of the 4, and he does seem to be one of the only board members we've
Mhm.
ever met on the show up until this point. So yeah, I would love to see the show go in that route where maybe there's only 4 board members and each one is a temper of their own, a representation therein. But
Mhm.
man, what a crazy episode! What a crazy episode! Oh my god! Oh my god!
Insane.
Yeah. And then, of course, we have the extremely weird and dark story that
Mhm.
Milchick is telling to the innies about Dieter and his brother Kier. And
Mhm.
specifically Dieter's death scene, which has been interpreted so many different ways. I've seen so many different theories already up until this point, where some people are thinking that Dieter wasn't even real at all, that he was just a metaphor
Hmm.
for a part of Kier that he had to kill within himself, a part of him that he needed to kind of sever in a sense. I do like the
Mhm.
idea of Dieter being a real person a little bit better, though. I feel like that fits a little bit more with Kier having a twin and essentially
Mhm.
him and his twin essentially being the first manifestation of a severed individual, 2 sides of the same half kind of thing, and how Kier had to kind of sever his ties with his brother in order to tame his own woe of sadness, where he looked
Mhm.
at his brother as a little bit of a weakness in a sense. And I think we, see that in the appendix when we learn about the 4th appendix earlier in the episode. When they go to read about it, we see Kier specifically talking about his twin, his twin unbalancing his emotions, almost like
Mhm.
he does go against his better nature because he wants to please his twin, he wants to please his brother. So it's almost like Kier was looking at Dieter as a weakness that he needed to get rid of.
Yes. And I like that you pointed out that particular sentence in these the horrific story, right?
Yeah.
Um not only that, but they actually mention him being a you suffered, right, at his wantingness. So
Yes.
to me, the way that they are using language, it seems like I understand the metaphor, and it definitely could be. Um, but the way that they're using the language and telling the story, it seems like it was a physical person, even going as far as saying like he's no one's brother now. So, I mean, he was a person. And also what happens to him afterward. If it was just a metaphor, right, we wouldn't
Mm,
get that description. But I found it really fitting that when they say this about Dieter, um, my love for my twin, unbalancing my judgment, that's kind of
mm.
something that Irving says to Mark. He says, it's clear that you don't have an objective perspective due to your feelings for
Yes.
her. So it's the
Yes.
same thing, love clouding judgment and ending in tragedy.
It is essentially the same thing where love, that Kier is looking at this love for his brother as a weakness, and even kind of Irving is, stop making goo goo eyes at her. Like he
Yeah.
was not enjoying it. He was not liking what he was seeing between Mark and
Mhm.
Helly, obviously because he, suspected Helly. And you would think that Irving would be approving of a relationship like that, considering he
Mhm.
had one of those relationships himself with Bert. But you could just tell that he knew something was off with her, that she wasn't quite her, and he wanted to kind of protect Mark. But yeah, I mean, man, the themes woven throughout, and we see some history repeating itself. And I know the whole point of this
Mhm.
story, the way they set it up, or at least this episode, the way they set it up is they want the innies to kind of walk in the same path as Kier and his brother once did, even going so far as providing their own shadow twins. So each of our innies have their own twin on the journey, just like Kier and Dieter did. So that's why I do think I like it a little bit better. I think it just fits a little better if Dieter was an actual twin and not just a metaphor.
Mhm.
um, but both are interesting, no matter which way it ends up being. But I think him being a twin just fits a little bit better for the context of what the episode sets up and what Severance sets up in the
Mhm.
sense of the twin brothers being the first kind of severed pair ever, really. But man,
Yes. I
great.
100% agree on that. Well, you mentioned this in your video, right? Explaining the episode. And it really got me thinking. When you have a twin brother, you don't really have control of them. They look like you and they have a lot of things in common with you, but you don't have control of their actions. And that's kind
Yep.
of the innies and the outies. They look like you and it is you, but you can't control what they do at nighttime when they go home. The same
True.
way that you can control what your innie is doing at the office or the relationships that they're having at the office. You can control, you can consent. So it makes a lot more sense that it would be an actual physical person in that way.
Mm. It could be. I mean, I think I like the way it fits with him being an actual person, but I totally understand the metaphor theory as well. I mean, it is an interesting theory to think that this was just a part of Kier that he wanted to shed, a part of his personality that he
Hmm.
wanted to shed to tame his temper of woe and sever this part of him. And he kind of manifests it in the sense of this twin that he never had. But then at the end of the episode, when we hear them describing the death of the brother, and how the eye pops out of his socket, and we see the pus dripping down his head, and the next thing we know, we hear it described as his hair turning to moss as it falls off of his scalp. Now that to me sounds an awful lot like a metaphor for a decomposition of a body being returned to nature.
Yes.
That's exactly what you would see. You would see hair turning to moss. You would see foliage start to grow on the body. You would see it start to decompose and become one with nature once again. And I think that's why we see this animal at the beginning of the episode was a kind of direct allegory, a direct mirror of the decomposition body of his brother, as we see this decomposition, this completely disgusting
Yeah.
decomposing seal. But yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Oh, I totally agree because I mean, like you have stated, everything is done with purpose. Time is so limited, and they had to fit so much into the episode. The seal, everything is done with purpose, and the fact that it was decomposing and it could have been anything. But Mark mentions this is how how dead things look.
Yeah.
So telling us like this is death, it's an actual thing that happened. I do like the metaphor idea. I like this better, but I could definitely see why people think it's a metaphor. We know
Yeah,
that Kier is unbalanced. He is an unbalanced individual. He has had a traumatic childhood, traumatic upbringing, and he fancies himself a god and a prophet. I mean, like you have mentioned, right? He plays God without
yeah.
thinking about the consequences. So somebody that unbalanced could potentially even believe that they do have a twin that doesn't exist, that was never there.
True. And that could be a really interesting aspect if he really does believe he had a twin, but didn't the whole time. Like he actually thought this twin was real, and it was just a figment of his imagination. Even that could be an interesting twist in and of itself. Because yeah, he was super messed up. I mean, he was a product of incest from the very beginning,
Hmm.
and he had, of course, these kind of these genetic abnormalities, which made his health not very ideal. So it's almost like he was always striving for the perfect physical being, the perfect kind of ideal, fit version of himself, which he never was. Um, but yeah, you really get a sense of how dark his childhood was. And you kind of start to see why he turned into the maniacal kind of cult like leader that he did turn into. Look where he came from. I mean, dark childhood like this is bound to have a profound effect on your growing up. And it looks like
Hmm.
it did. Looks like it screwed him up bad, really bad.
Yeah. Yeah, and he thinks of himself as a god, as the chosen one, right? We get the Kier anthem, like here, the chosen one here. And I really I found it very, I hated the fact that when Irving, and I understand it, right? Because this is a corporate cult. That's what it is. Like the corporation is their religion. But the fact that when they're sentencing Irving to death, they say, may Kier's kindness or forgiveness find you in the eternal darkness,
Yes.
reminding him of Kier, who has done all of this to him. And that's what people say about religion, right? When somebody passes, or may God be with you, all of this stuff, and in that moment they don't mention a god, they mention Kier, the company.
Yeah, that's true. Praise Kier, praise Lumen. Everything is it is their church in a sense. This company is the church. It is meant to be worshipped, or at least they want it to be worshipped by their employees. And that's why they have all these things like these perks that you do a good job and you get this, do a good job, you get that. They want to reward a faithful service. It's not like they want to reward a job well done. It's almost like they do want to reward your faith in the company, in Kier, even going so far as, like you pointed out in the beginning of the season, them going so far as to literally thank Kier for the Macrodad uprising,
Yeah,
thank Kier for the rebellion. It's like, Jesus Christ, everything
yeah,
goes back to praising Kier. Crazy.
exactly. He's a prophet and a god. And we kind of have seen themes of prophecy and godlike cults that get started in this manner. When your video premiered, a lot of us were talking about different cult leaders
Yeah.
who have the same sort of storyline, where they will always say that they went out into the woods or into the meadow, and that is when they were presented, or they met either an angel or like golden scriptures. And so the story of Kier is very reminiscent of all of these other leaders that stated, right, to their congregation or to their followers that they alone went into the woods or somewhere private, and they met all these entities, and you are just to believe them, you're just to accept that this indeed happened. So very much reminiscent of a cult or a prophet. And of course we have Rickon, our other prophets. So kind of like Severance is riddled with themes of prophecy.
It is. Yeah, it is. It kind of is woven throughout there, right on the surface there. And you can see all of these, tons of biblical references as well. And even the story of Kier and Dieter themselves, very kind of it kind of almost mirrored the story of Cain and Abel, of Cain killing his brother Abel and kind of bashing his head in, how it seemed like how Kier bashed his own brother's head in. It is kind of, it always goes back to these weird kind of worshiping tendencies where it is, he's depicted as a godlike figure. Even in the painting here, we see him literally depicted as a godlike figure with this kind of, the light of rays kind of radiating from him, like he's kind of this godly figure smiting down these four tempers. It's all kind of always conveyed to be some kind of religious connotation, where this is not a company, this is a religion in the sense. Super
Yeah.
creepy.
Oh my
Super
God.
creepy.
And then this, I love that you pointed out this, the picture that you have here, the waffle
Mm,
party. We were
yep.
all so confused about the waffle party. I know that, a lot of us, everything seemed to be corporate and appropriate until we get to this insane waffle party. And I love that you made the connection that these are the four tempers, because
Mm,
the outfits and the entire thing was so random. And there was a whip next to Dylan at the waffle party. So a
yes.
lot of us, when we watched it, we didn't know what in the world was going on with this horrific like perk. I wouldn't want that perk. It's terrifying. But I love how you connected it to that being the tempers. Now it all makes sense.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, yeah, looking back at that waffle party, you definitely like now I look back on it with totally different eyes, with a totally different perspective. Where, yeah, the first time you look at it, it just looks like it's this weird kind of show they're putting on for Dylan. But then you take a little bit of a deeper look, and it's like, oh shit, this whole waffle party is meant to symbolize a retelling of Kier taming the four tempers. Because even in this scene, we see Dylan, and the mask he has on is a mask of Kier, like he's playing the role of Kier himself.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's
that's
yeah,
right.
mm, super creepy, super creepy. And you mentioned earlier, Little Chick says after he tells the story of the brothers, he talks about
Mhm.
the thieving old nanny, the thieving nanny. Maybe he can tell
Yeah.
that story. Maybe he can tell chapter 2 in the morning. And yeah, the thieving nanny, chapter 2, must be the chapter where he tames the temper of the old lady. I mean, I imagine that has to be a representation of the old
Oh.
lady's temper. Um,
Wow.
so
Yes. I was like, what is that old woman? Like, what would she represent? That's
yeah,
right, because she has the gray hair.
yeah.
Yeah, I think
So it's
I
almost like
think
that
that's
could
it.
it could be. It could be. Maybe the old lady is the representation of dread, because here we have woe, which Irving just tamed. We have dread. I mean, we have malice here in the goat. We have frolic here in the jester, and then of course we have dread here in the old lady. So maybe chapter 2 in that book would have been Kier taming his next temper in dread,
Mhm.
essentially the old lady, the
Oh my
thieving
goodness.
nanny.
The nanny. I hope that he didn't kill her. If he killed the brother, and like Irving had to almost kill someone in order to tame Woe. So I'm wondering, now that you have stated that, what are the other Ennies gonna have to do? Are they gonna have to do something that extreme, where they have to tame it by doing something extreme? Because I mean, I imagine, I don't know, I'm just thinking, did he kill his nanny? If anybody would, it would be Kier.
Jeez. Honestly, yeah, if I could see anybody killing their own nanny, it would be a messed up adolescent Kier that just doesn't have control of his emotions. Yeah, thieving nanny. Yeah, the nanny, steals something and he kind of, smites her down. Yeah, I could see that. I could definitely see that. But yeah, it's cool to see what they're doing with these tempers and how they're going to be, again, represented and manifested in the rest of the season. But I do really hope that we see it play out like that, where Irving tempered Woe, and now we're going to see any Mark, any Helly, and any Dylan each kind of tame one of the three remaining tempers. I would love to see that thematically play out over the
Mhm.
rest of the season and see how it kind of is manifested and what the representations of the other three look like. Because Woe looked incredibly scary and like completely looked like one of the Ankui children. Woe did, right?
Oh
I mean, like
yes.
straight out of From, like
Oh my
straight
God,
out
yes.
of the From Ankui children. Like what the fuck?
Even
Oh,
the
God.
hair. You're
Mm.
so right. That looks like an Ankoi child, all grown up.
Even the freaking hair.
So they grow up, and she's also wearing white.
Hmm.
They always used to wear those white little dresses, all
Yeah.
grown up and working in tech.
Still working at Lumen, yeah.
She was doing a great job
Uh,
too. She was just typing away.
yep, sitting
Like,
there typing away. Yeah. Maybe when the Ankui children get rescued from, they'll go work at Lumen. Maybe it's all one universe. Who knows?
it might be
But yeah.
because there's so much crossover, right? Like,
Mm.
so we have the Ankoi child, but also Irving, when he's saying like, "I'm a killer, Mr. Milkshake," it he screams, he's like, she's a mole," and that was Randall's whole thing.
Yeah.
Like when he kidnapped Donna, he just kept like telling Jim, "She's a mole," like it's her. So it might be the same universe, yeah.
It could be. It's certainly a lot of similarities here, especially in this episode for sure. Yeah, crazy stuff. Crazy stuff, man. I think the goat is Dread. I don't think the goat is Dread. I mean, I think it makes more sense for the goat to be Malice, because all of the connotations that goats have, um, especially with Satanism and all other kind of dark ritualistic tendencies. I think Malice being goat makes more sense in my opinion. But who knows?
Absolutely. And the
Who
horns, right? The
and the
horns,
horns. Mm,
malice, and
yeah. Man, crazy stuff. I've been getting some Truman Show vibes, not like Mark's on a TV show, but his entire existence is carefully constructed and curated. You do kind of almost get that sense where so much of Mark's life is kind of being manipulated just beyond his field of view, his outie life and his innie life. I mean, clearly it seems like Mark is very important to the company. Him finishing this Cold Harbor case seems to be a top priority for Lumen. So yeah, you get the sense that they're incredibly invested in Mark. So I wouldn't be surprised if they are, manipulating certain facets of his life without him even knowing it. And maybe that's why Frolic is so close to Mark, watching him in that diner to keep an eye on him, because it seems like they are very invested in Mark doing his job. Crazy stuff.
oh yeah, he's very special. And now we have the daughter, right? And Egan, like
Mm.
having a relationship with him to the point where she actually carries out a physical relationship. And it just makes you think, what's so special about him?
Yes, I know. What is it? And what is Cold Harbor? I mean, if Mark is working on Cold Harbor and this case file is so important to Lumen, whatever Cold Harbor goes on to end up being, which seems to be connected to Gemma at the very least, based on what we saw on the screen, then yeah, I mean, you can see why they're so invested in Mark. They need him to be operating at peak efficiency to kind of complete this Cold Harbor file in a sense. But what is it?
Hmm.
What is Cold Harbor at the end of the day? I don't know. I don't know. Insane. Absolutely insane. His sister and his husband live in the town where Mark moved to, where he accepted a job at Lumen. That's not coincidence, and that's a good point as well. Maybe none of it is coincidence. Maybe it is more a little. Maybe it is a little bit more manipulation there than we originally realized. Maybe Mark's life has been kind of curated to be this perfect employee, as far as even becoming a severed employee. I mean, wouldn't it be so devious if Lumen went so far as to set up his wife's murder so he would be more inclined to take a severed job in the first place? Like, how deep does it actually go? Why is Mark so important to Lumen? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, this was a good scene, though. I mean, when Irving finally kind of tempers his own woe and confronts his sadness for Bert, then we instantly start to see the screen change from numbers to letters, literally spelling out Egan, Eagan, all over the place, and it almost kind of gives you that sense of it's like a face. And I feel like this was the final straw Irving needed to realize fully that Helly was not Helly. I feel like this was the final kind of piece of evidence he needed, because it seemed like right from here, he went directly to find her, to confront her right after waking up.
Hmm. Oh yeah, I totally missed that. And like I said, I watched it like 4 times, but it's not until I watched your video that I realized that it spelled out something and that it was making a face.
Mm.
Um, so it makes more sense. Yeah. I just thought maybe he was just dreaming, and because he's not used to dreaming, he was just like staring and everything was blending in. But yeah, that's totally a face, and it makes a lot of sense, and I could totally see it now.
Mm. Yeah, super weird. Super weird. But I can't praise John Turturro's performance enough in this episode. I love this scene right here when he first confronts her and he says, you know, what you said to me last night was cruel. Helly was never cruel. And it hit so hard. Like I love
Hmm.
that dialogue. And then even more so him kind of
Yeah.
coming up close to her and saying, you know, if you're not Helly, then who are you? And I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm a big John Turturro fan, but I feel like he delivers dialogue so incredibly well, where everything he says is so believable for his character. And Irving really is one of those people who is strongly guided by his moral principle and protecting Kelly here. Now he knows he has to do something kind of violent here, of course, but he knows he's doing it for Helly. And it's just, I don't know, every line he delivered in this episode was just meticulously crafted. And I can't praise
Hmm.
his performances enough. He killed it in this episode.
Oh, yes. The dialogue was amazing because it was so condensed. So it wasn't a monologue where he went on and on. It was just like such a beautifully said line. Like
Yeah.
what you said to me was cruel. Helly was never cruel. It's in the same, I put it in the same, box as my other favorite line of the show. You felt like you were choking on her ghost. Dialogue so condensed, but yet so profound that you don't need a monologue. Or like Game
Mm,
of Thrones, where the king says, 7 kingdoms weren't enough to fill the hole that she left behind, talking about his wife that he can no longer remember. It's those tiny little lines. But also, what I noticed is that when he first approaches her, he had just had the dream with Bert. He says, "Hey kid," and that's what Bert used to say to him. "Hey kid."
yes. Ah,
So almost
man.
like carrying out, like having Bert with him in his last moments when he's about to do this by saying like, "Hey kid."
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't even think of that. But yeah, that makes perfect sense. It does. It's like, you know, he tamed his sadness for Bert, taming his woe, but in a sense, now he has Bert, you know, a part of him in a way. And yeah, no, I can totally see that. Absolutely. I've seen this going around a lot that people think that when Irving woke up from after taming the temper of woe, that he was no longer severed. And that's an interesting idea. I mean, it's, you know, you start to wonder, is it possible for a character to reintegrate themselves naturally, just naturally on their own? Whether through some kind of extreme emotional situation, some extreme adrenaline situation. Is it possible for one of these characters to reintegrate without undergoing the technological reintegration process that him taming Woe? Could that have kind of reintegrated him in a sense? And I think that's an interesting theory. Who knows?
I like it. I like it,
Yeah.
and it fits what we know scientifically to be true in our world. There are profound things that can happen to a human being where the makeup of your brain, your mind will break, shatter, split, and come back together in different ways,
Yeah.
depending on extreme situations. So I like it. It fits, our world, and it would be interesting if they could do it themselves. That way they don't have to go to this like garage operation, right? That I forget her name, that she's running, right? I was very
Oh yeah.
concerned
Right.
about that.
Mm. Yeah.
The
Yeah. Yeah.
garage surgery.
Yeah, Ragabi, her
Ragabi, yes.
incredibly shoddy operation where she's got to bang on her equipment to get it to work. Like I have no confidence in her, absolutely not. She already killed Petey. Who knows what she's doing to Mark? Yeah, I don't know. I think it's an interesting question, if nothing else, if natural reintegration is even possible. I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe it is. Good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah, look at his change in expression, how he spoke, and how he was positive. He was. It's almost like he knew exactly what he needed to do. It's almost like he wakes up from that dream. He wakes up from tempering woe, and it's like he just knew. He kind of just knew what he needed to do. He needed to go and save Helly, and he did. He did exactly that. He did exactly that. Man, what a crazy episode.
Yeah. And well, you would imagine you see this in unfortunate events, right? When people are getting close to accepting the end of life, in whatever way that may be, whether they take their own or it's the end of life, there is this peace that comes with it, this acceptance that comes with and the end of life at times, and tempering his sadness and understanding that it was no longer going to be there, that he was okay with nothing, that he was about to do something that would end tragically. That kind of makes sense as to why he was so calm.
Yeah, yeah, you do get that sense. Yeah, and sometimes that happens, I guess. People do. They get closer to the end and they just kind of, become at peace with it, I would imagine. It's probably a scary feeling, but yeah, I mean, Irving kind of just he knew what he needed to do. He knew the consequences, what the consequences of it would probably be, and he accepted them gladly. Gladly. And then, his last words to Dylan, just remember,
Mhm.
hang in there. It's like, because him and Dylan were such good friends.
Yeah.
Probably the best of friends in the entire MDR, circle. And him just
Yeah.
looking up at Dylan, ah, that killed me.
I know. But also, it might have double meaning, right? People were saying,
Mm,
like, just remember, hang in there. That's a poster. So, like, what I thought is maybe he, we know that he draws, that he had in the office when he talks to Felicia a drawing of the elevator. The apparently it's called the exports elevator or the exports hall. So he
yeah.
drew that. And I thought maybe he hid it behind the poster so that they can
Oh,
find it, so that they could go looking for this elevator, because that is major, that's very important. I feel like he has been working on this for a long time, finding the elevator, and so he would need to leave something behind. We do have evidence for that being something that the innies do, like Petey. He had that drawing behind the picture frame.
yeah, that's right.
So maybe that's what he's saying. He's like, Dylan, remember, just hang in there. Go look at that poster. Like, remove it. There's something in there.
Maybe, maybe Dylan, maybe Irving did kind of hide a little something for the rest of his team to find, and maybe he's hoping that they will kind of pick up where he left off in terms of trying to find this elevator. Because I do remember seeing a little preview, not a preview, but in the season 2 trailer for Severance before the season even started, there's one scene of what looks to be Helly looking at that same drawing that Irving made
Mm.
of the elevator, the same little pencil drawing of it that was in the same book that he was drawing Bert over and over again. At some point, Helly ends up with that inside MDR. So I think you're right. Maybe he stashed that somewhere for them to find.
Yeah. In that room, it kind of, well, all of MDR kind of looks the same because of the blue and the monochromatic walls. But
Yeah,
maybe it's behind that poster. Maybe it falls off the just hang in there poster. Because it
yeah,
makes no sense that they would show us the conversation with Felicia and the drawing, the fact that he has a drawing in a notebook, if it's not going to come into play.
yeah. I think you're right. I think it makes sense. I mean, it does seem like it's a proper foreshadowing for something like that. And like you mentioned, we've already seen the theme throughout the show ever since season 1, where of characters leaving things hidden for their coworkers to find, whether it's Petey leaving the map, whether it's Mark trying to burn a freaking message into his retina for his innie. They're constantly trying to, leave stuff for each other to, to kind of help them on what they need to do. But yeah, I mean, I wonder, where's the show go from here? How do they untangle the web of what Helena did to Mark alone? let alone the the loss of Irving and everything that happens. How is MDR going to function now? They've always been a four-person team. Does this mean they're going to get a new team member now? I guess that's the biggest question.
Hmm.
Will we see Irving get a replacement on the show, do you think? In the MDR office, a new coworker.
Wow, that would be exciting. It would be exciting for me because I love seeing the new coworkers. They were only there for one episode, but if they could bring one of them back, they were fun, they were funny. I love Irving, and you did tell us last week about the watermelon party.
Yeah.
You told us he wasn't there, and you told us he might like this might be his last episode. And I still, with that knowledge, I don't think that I was prepared to see Irving go. And right now, as I'm sitting here, I'm still not prepared. I still cannot imagine that the next episode, like he's just gone.
I know. I mean, especially after a performance like this and after seeing him step up like this, it's like, man, all I want to do is see more Irving now. And it's yeah, it's kind of sad that he's gone. It is kind of sad. Yeah, we get that the little preview of the watermelon party, the watermelon that's carved in Irving's likeness. And John Turturro kind of gave a little bit of a spoiler away before the season even began. I feel like that's something he probably shouldn't have mentioned, but he mentions in an interview that he wasn't present for that scene. The scene of the Irving watermelon was a scene that he did not partake in. And that's what led me to believe, like, holy crap, is this like a memorial for Irving? And I guess in a sense it is going to be. It looks like we're going to have a watermelon Irving memorial in episode 5.
Hmm. Oh, and how
Mm.
heartbreaking. How do you eat watermelon when they just took your best friend and you got to see him
Oh,
being walked over to his execution,
ah,
basically, and now you're expected to have a watermelon party where you remember your friend. And I mean, you did
ugh.
lay it out for us, but I still was not prepared. I guess we're gonna have to get a new person in. I hope it's the Italian guy because he was really like he was entertaining with the stories. I want to know more about that branch.
Yeah, I do want to learn a little bit more about his branch, his just broke down Lumen branch where they don't even have an elevator, where they literally have to climb a rope to get to their floor. Like, what the fuck? What shoddy operation did he come from? My God. Oh, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Faith and Repentance asks, "Is Irv really gone?" And I guess that's the question. I mean, I have to imagine no. I don't know. Something inside, just a gut feeling, but something tells me we will see Irving again. I think we're going to see plenty of Audi Irving. I hope they continue to develop the Audi Irving storyline. But in terms of seeing any Irving again, I think we will. Maybe not this season, but I think we will see Eddie Irving again. I have to believe we're gonna see him at some point. This isn't the true end of his story. But if it is, even if it is, even if we never see him again, this is one of I mean, what better ending can a character hope for in terms of how he went out, sacrificing himself to save his friend, save Helly. So if this is the last time we see Irving, he went out great, but I don't know. Part of me thinks we'll see him again. You think we'll ever see any Irving again?
I'm not ready to let go. But I have been wrong before. I thought that it was Helly the entire time. So I think better question for the chat because your chat, the Sevis, Jeremy Sevis have been right. Everybody said you did a poll. Everybody said that's Elena. So I think
Yep.
that this is a better question for the chat. Do you
Mm.
guys think that Irving is gone? Yes or no?
Yeah. Will we see Irving again, guys? Will we only see Audi Irving going forward, or do you think we will see any Irving at some point in the future, even if it's maybe not again in the season, even if it's maybe not until season 3? What do you guys think? Think we will see any Irving again? But yeah, Audi Irving might be on a mission. Yeah, he might be. I mean, we do know that Christopher Walken's character, Bert, does have a few more scenes in season 2 that we haven't seen yet. There's a few scenes in the season 2 trailer of Christopher Walken that we have not seen in any of the episodes yet. So at the very least, we are going to see Christopher Walken again. I imagine if we're going to see him again, we're probably at least going to see Audi Irving again. But yeah, I don't know. Will we ever see any Irving again? Irving is gone. Hope his Audi gets together with Bert. Maybe.
Mm.
Maybe it will.
Pam Jam, he's married. And according to what we saw, Pam Jam, he's happily married. They had sweaters, right? We see the depiction of happiness. A happy couple, sweaters around each other, like wrapped around, looking at pictures, smiling. So I don't know that they could get together. But that does bring up a good point. This was my favorite love story, Bert and Irving. And now
Hmm.
that both of them are essentially gone, the Innies no longer exist. That's
Ah,
done. It ended in tragedy.
it did. It did unfortunately end in tragedy. I mean, and yeah, I mean, Innie Burt has been gone for a little while now, which of course is what devastating Irving to begin with, which is why he was so willing to lay down his life and sacrifice himself for Helly, because again, he did just want the sadness to end at the end of the day. Um, yeah, I don't know, man. It's going to be interesting to see where they go from here. I cannot wait to learn a little bit more about Irving's Audi. At the very least, I want to know what kind of training did he have. Like you mentioned, is he really already part of the rebellion? Is he already secretly working with Ragabi? Is he secretly already severed? Some people think he's secretly already reintegrated, which I don't know if
Mhm.
that's the case personally, but who knows? I mean, who knows what's really going to happen? But we do know we are going to get some more Christopher Walken on the series, and I have to imagine if we're going to see him, his storyline is probably going to be tied to Irving's. I mean,
Mm.
I think it would be weird for Christopher Walken's storyline to all of a sudden get tied to someone like Mark or Helly or the company or maybe the company. But I feel like as long as Christopher Walken's on the show, his storyline should be tied to Irving, Innie or Audi. So I think we're going to see more Audi Irving, but I haven't given up on Innie Irving. I think we will maybe see him again at some point. The
Yeah.
resurrection of Innie Irving.
And he was making those phone calls, right? You don't go to a phone booth and make a mysterious phone call. And then he had Bert following him. So they
Yeah.
are tied together. Even on the outside, we're going to see more of them because they are intertwined in some way. I did see on your Discord somebody come up with like an insane theory that I love because it's insane about potentially Irving and Bert being on opposite sides and Bert or
Ooh.
Irving having to kill the other one,
Ah, my
which
God.
would just be like heartbreaking. But I like it. It's insanity, chaos.
I like that. I think that's actually a really good theory. And yeah, it would be interesting to see that contrast where it's polar opposite from innie to outie, much like a lot of our innies and our outies are kind of polar opposites from one another. And I know we've talked about this numerous times, and I feel like a good argument can be made that some of the innies are even living freer and more fulfilling lives than some of the outies, even though the outies ultimately have the control. But the innies have a certain sense of freedom that the outies will never have. That freedom of not having the responsibility of everything that comes with being an outie, a job, a mortgage, day to day life, all of that. The innies, all
Hmm.
they really have is their time inside the office. So in a sense, the innies do have a small measure of freedom that the outies will never enjoy. So I think that would be an interesting contrast if we see Innie Irving and Innie Burt both madly in love with each other, and then we see Audi Irving and Audi Burt just completely at odds with one another. That would be a very interesting contrast. So that's a great theory. I love that.
Hmm.
I like that. That's a good one. But yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think? Will we see Irving again? I think we'll see Irving fully reintegrated soon. So in a way, we'll see an Irving again, and that's a possibility. I mean, if Irving does get fully integrated at some point, then yeah, essentially we will see any Irving again, or at least a version of any Irving again. Very much like Mark is going through right now. Irv will fight his way back. Yes, hell yes. That's what I want to see. I want to see Irv fight his way back. I think John Turturro will be back, and I think he will. I mean, even if we only focus on his Audi for the rest of season two, I don't think he's going to be gone for the show. I don't think he's going to be gone entirely. He might be gone from Lumen. He might be gone for the Severed Floor for a while, but now I get the feeling they're going to start focusing more on Irving's Audi persona, and maybe that's why they have left Irving's Audi so mysterious up until this point. Maybe they knew at some point they were going to reach this point where any Irving was going to get sidelined, and that would open up a lot more screen time for them to explore Audi Irving. So maybe they've left Audi Irving mysterious
Mm.
purposely for this moment, so they can now start diving into that. But yeah, I think we'll see more.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like that. That makes a lot of sense.
What an episode! What an episode! Such a crazy episode of TV. It really was. I mean, at times it didn't even feel like I was watching Severance. At times it felt like I was watching this kind of acid trippy, mind bending tale of betrayal and loyalty all wrapped into one, with the
Mhm.
loyalty of Irving mixed with the betrayal of Helena. It did
Mhm.
feel, again, it did kind of feel like a mini movie in a sense. It didn't have that TV episode feeling to it, and almost had that, if this was an episode, it almost had that kind of season finale feeling. Like when big stuff happens in the finale, it almost had
Yes.
a finale feeling to it in a sense. Yeah. Ah, and I love
Yes.
this.
And I mean, you told us. You told us, right? Like everything's going to be different from now on. And I heard it. I hear everything you say, but I just thought, how can it really change? And now it's just so much
Right.
darker.
Yeah. Exactly? How can one episode, like, how much can one episode really change a show? And I guess now we know the answer. Freaking profoundly, I guess, in a sense, if done right. Because yeah, there's so many consequences. There's so many implications going forward for so many things we saw in this episode that, I mean, we're going to have to see how the aftermath plays out going forward. So, I mean, at this point, I cannot wait for episode 5. I cannot wait to see episode 5. Like, bring on the severed floor. We know on episode 5 they are going to be back on the severed floor, and based on the little bit of footage that was sent to me, we are going to see Miss Casey in episode 5. It looks like. So, I think we're going to get
Oh my God.
some interesting stuff here. Man, some interesting
Oh my
stuff.
God. Miss Casey. So, I mean, what is Mark going to do? Is he going to
Ah,
tell her?
man. And I imagine, any Mark might have Irving's words in the back of his mind, especially when they're sitting at the fire and he says, "Stop making goo eyes at her." And then he talks about, he's like,
Mhm.
you're making love with your eyes to her while your Audi's wife rots somewhere, which was
Yeah.
so profound. But I almost feel like that was Irving's attempt to get through to Mark, to get him to
Mhm.
realize what he was doing. But yeah, I
And he
mean,
didn't. And he really
mm,
didn't. He was blinded by his love for her because then we see him in the tent, right? And like any Mark fashion, he's like smiling really big and says, I'll make googly eyes at whoever I want.
oh, that's right. He did say that. I'll make Google eyes at whoever I want. Oh my God, yeah. He's infatuated. He's falling for her.
Mhm.
So, and when you're falling for someone, he's just so deeply entranced with her that he's not fully seeing the warning signs and everything that Burr is trying to impart upon him. He's just so entranced with his idea of love. I mean, the Innies are essentially children at the end of the day, like you always say. They are children. They're experiencing all of these things for the very first time. Emotions, intimacy. Like, these are things that are all incredibly new to them. So you can totally understand why Mark had the blinders on, in a sense, where he's just so infatuated that he's not seeing anything around him.
Yeah, but you brought up a really interesting point in your video that you put out today about the betrayal, not only of what actually transpired physically, but being so in love with someone that you notice who they are, right? And the betrayal of Mark, like I understand that he is very young, right? uh,
Yeah,
Basically 2 years old, infatuated, so blinded by love, but the fact that he didn't notice that that was not Helly, that he didn't notice tiny little things or um, reactions that Helly would have had that are so different than what Elena did. Like making the joke at that horrible story, not caring
yeah,
about the marshmallows. Like
yeah.
he missed so many flags, kind of like me, really, guys. He missed all of the flags that that was not Helly. and the heartbreak of how did you not notice that that was not me?
I imagine it's going to. I imagine that's something that they should at the very. I hope they explore that. Like I really do. Like when they're all back on the severed floor, and everything does come to light. I do hope they at least explore that exact notion of Helly maybe being a little upset, maybe being a little let down by Mark. That at the end of the day, he couldn't tell the difference. At the end of the day, he couldn't see the signs that she was not her, and that's going to hurt Helly, I think, in the long run. Like, especially when you're falling for this person and you're thinking, of course, the person I'm falling for is going to know me better than anyone. But for some reason, Mark just did not. He just failed to see all the signs that this wasn't Helly, and I think that's going to hurt her. I think that's going to severely hurt her.
Yeah, but then again, he makes goo eyes at anybody he wants.
This he does. This he does. I make goo eyes at anybody I want. Oh man, crazy, crazy. And this was interesting as well. And I didn't catch this until I saw somebody mentioning it. And I'm so sorry, I'm blanking on the name who mentioned it, but it's actually a pretty good point. The way we see Gemma's face flashing to Helena's, like back and forth real quick, not only a sign of Mark's reintegration, but in the intro sequence, in the new season 2 intro sequence, we have that one part of it where they're going down the elevator, the hallway with the elevator at the end. And inside the elevator, you see Gemma and Helly switching back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, switching from one to the other, signifying the two love interests of Mark's Innie and his Outie. And this was almost like a direct callback to that. The flashing of the face back from Gemma to Helly was a very interesting callback to the intro sequence when we see that exact kind of imagery happening there. So that was a good catch for who caught that. I like that.
Yeah, I didn't remember that at all.
Me
Not at
neither. No,
all.
I didn't. I didn't. I had to go back and watch the intro sequence. And there's one point where you see a depiction of the hallway and the elevator at the end of the hallway, and you see the elevator doors closing, but as they're closing, you see one person standing in the middle of the elevator, and it's flashing back between Helly and Gemma, or Helly and Miss Casey. So this was kind of an interesting callback to that, an interesting wink and a nod. I brought, speaking of winks and nods and foreshadowings, I brought this up more as a joke in my video, but even though it's a joke, it's kind of accurate. This whole scene at the end of episode 4 was completely foreshadowed in the original orientation video that the innies see at the beginning of season 2, when we see them bobbing for pineapples. And we specifically see Helly bobbing for pineapples, and look who's right behind her.
I
Irving.
know. I know. I couldn't believe it. But it makes so much sense. Now it makes so much sense. And, Miss Cobell was right. There was a pineapple involved. Like, this was total foreshadowing. I can't even believe that. When I saw that and I saw the little Irving on the side, all of the signs have been there. What else did we miss? But there was a pineapple involved, and this was exactly what was happening. It's
Yeah.
insane.
It's almost making me want to go back and watch the whole MDR video a little bit closer to see if there were other foreshadowings in there for other things we're going to see later on in the season, or things that we've maybe already seen, because they have a really good way of very subtly foreshadowing these things. Like, this was the perfect foreshadowing of Irving just dunking Helly in the freaking water over and over again. They specifically put Irving there, obviously by design, and then boom, here you got Helly, and it's the exact same camera angle. And that's what kind of made me recognize it right away. It was the camera angle, both the upshot of the underwater kind of view looking up at Helly as she is being dunked underwater, the exact same camera angle. And yeah, just heavy foreshadowing. Man.
Maybe any scene with pineapples. Anywhere that we see a pineapple, there's some foreshadowing. Because the pineapple is so random. But yeah, it totally makes me want to go back and watch the entire clip, because maybe there is something going on.
Maybe.
I love this though. I thought it was hilarious, but also spooky.
It was. it was definitely it was definitely the most unsettling episode of Severance I've ever seen. Like, it was brilliant. Don't get me wrong. Like, in terms of the the themes that are woven throughout, the really good writing, the great dialogue, the awesome performances, the great cinematography. It really was a monumental episode that they kind of filmed here, but it was a little unsettling at times, and especially seeing the a little bit of the deception from Helena, or seeing the dark story and the dark origins of Kier and his brother, or his, or whatever Dieter was. It was a little unsettling at times. Like, this episode did get really dark.
It did. It did. And it's a whole different, you and I talked about this, but it's an entirely different Severance than what we have known.
Yeah.
So far, it was corporate, and it was beautiful, touching love stories, even stories about grief, and they were beautiful in a way. E- Even though we had death and grief, it wasn't to the extreme that it is now. Now it's dark. Now it's tragic. And all those beautiful love stories that they made up now are just horrifying, because every single
Mm,
one of them um, is questioning morality and ethical questions, and just the
yeah.
nature and philosophy of life. What is right? Every single, you pointed this out in your video, but every single one of them has a complicated relationship, including Dylan with his own wife.
Yeah. Yeah. They all have some kind of conflict going on in their personal life, or at least everyone that we've met. I know we still need to learn a little bit more about Irving's Audi, but yeah, they all have something going on in their life where, again, this is why I do feel like the innies, they do have this measure of freedom and this measure of happiness that the Audis will probably never have, just considering the nature of the two kind of beings and what they are. It might sound like just torture, the never ending toil of being forced to just work day in and day out with no respite. It's literally the only thing you live for. But at the end of the day, they still also have this measure of freedom that the Audis don't have. And yeah, it's the themes that they keep weaving in and out of the show has been very profound. And man, at this point, how do they top this? Like, where do we go from here? We know the next episode coming up. We have a few episodes coming up. One of them is named Trojan Horse. What is that going to
Wow.
be? What is the Trojan Horse? Who is going to be sneaking in? I mean, obviously, you think of Trojan Horse, you think of the Trojan Horse in the famous battle, of course.
Hmm.
But what is that going to represent? How is that going to manifest on the show? Who will be the Trojan Horse at the end of the day? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I hear Trojan horse, and it makes me think of those paintings of the slaughter between departments, where
Ooh,
it was with an in-house, but they have these horrifying like slaughter, right? Where people are just killing each other. That's what it makes me think of. But maybe against management, maybe we do get to see some actual like physical violence that is depicted in those
mm,
pictures. Um, you said it perfectly though. This last episode, that's a finale episode. That's a movie. That's a lot. So, and that was just the title was Woe's Hollow. Not a big deal. What we're getting next, Trojan Horse, that's gonna be insanity. I imagine
yeah,
it has to be like, I don't know, 10 times better than what we just saw with a name like that. A title like
yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah. And yeah, Helena of Troy, exactly. Helena of Troy, exactly. It's right there on the surface as well. Helena of Troy, and the Trojan horse. I don't know if any of them are going to be the Trojan horse. I tend to think it might be Dylan, because it seems like Dylan is going to start to have a pull where he is going to have to make a decision. I mean, he's loving these new visitations that he's getting with his Audi's family. I imagine that's something he is going to want to continue to have. And the actor playing Dylan has even mentioned this in some of the interviews, where his want to, his want to have a connection with his Audi's family will end up causing some problems between him and his coworkers. So I could totally see Dylan eventually having a crisis of conscience in terms of, who am I loyal to at the end of the day, my team or my family? which is an impossible decision for him, I imagine. But it seems like that's what Lumen wants. Lumen kind of is dangling this family notion in front of Dylan to keep him in line, in a sense. So
That's a
I'm worried
great
about Dylan.
point.
Yeah.
I am worried about him now that you mentioned that too, because he kind of made promises. He made promises to his Audi's wife when she told him basically that he was like, "Is he dumb? Is he a dick?" He promises at the end, after hearing the fact that he is not the greatest person, he says, "Don't worry about me. I'm gonna make you all proud." So he's
Yes.
already promised this
Uh,
to the family. Now
he
he owes them
has.
that.
Oh man. He did. And yeah, I promise I'm going to make you proud. And especially after hearing that his Audi, is a little bit of a mess up and is a little bit of a, I don't want to call him full on deadbeat, but he clearly is someone who, he can't hold a job. He didn't seem very competent. He couldn't even cook for the kids. And the one time we
Yeah.
see him like in the house, it's just a mess. Yeah, I mean, I could totally see Dylan being caught and being end up walking a tightrope essentially, where he's going to try and balance his want to establish this relationship with his family while also maintaining his relationship with his coworkers. Because I know Dylan cares about his coworkers. He cares about Mark. He
Yeah.
cares about Ellie. He loves Irving. He cares about them. So this is going to be a very
Yeah.
difficult choice for Dylan when these two loyalties are tested, and he does ultimately have to make a choice, one or the other. It's going to be very tough for him.
And it brings us back to what is now a cliche, but we have all heard it. If you have, worked in a corporate, you have heard it. We're a family. We are your family. But who do you choose? Do you choose your actual family and keeping a job? Because the wife did stress to Dylan that he's not able to hold jobs. And so it's very important that he keep this one. So who are you
Yeah.
loyal to? The family that work says that you belong to, or your actual family?
Eh, Man, that's going to be tough, and I do think that'll probably be Dylan's dilemma going forward for the rest of the season. Where I get the point, I get the sense he will probably come to a point where he's going to have to make that choice, family or friends. And how the hell do you make a choice like that? I mean, obviously, at the end of the day, you kind of got to choose family, right? I mean, if you have to, family is the most important thing in the world.
Mm.
Um, so it's going to be tough for Dylan. I think Dylan's going to have some tough choices ahead, some very tough choices ahead, indeed.
Well, you said it perfectly. Dread. I would dread that decision. I would
Ugh,
absolutely dread the decision of having to turn against the innies, because morally I should be with the innies, um, and be dreading the fact that I made promises to this woman. I promised her I would keep the job, and now I might not. Like, I might get fired. Like that. That's a dreadful situation to be in, and I wouldn't want to have that conversation.
no, I wouldn't either. I wouldn't either. That is a conversation I would want to avoid like the plague. Yeah, I mean, it's he's gonna have some really tough choices. I think they all are, though. I think all of them are gonna have some very tough choices by the time this is out. Mark as well. You know, we saw how tragically Irving and Bert's story ended, the any version of Irving and Bert, and you get the sense something similar is going to happen with Mark, his innie or his outie. I mean, he's essentially two sides of him are in love with two totally different women. One of these loves
Hmm.
aren't going to last, essentially. I mean, it's either going to be he's going to have to make a choice at one point, especially now that he is reintegrating, and at one point he will just be Mark again. He's going to have to choose for his feelings for Helly or his feelings for his wife Gemma.
That's a great point. And also, he's kind of like messed everything up with both of them, because
Yeah.
essentially he slept with a third person, not Gemma, not Helly, a third person. So
Uh,
now even both of those relationships are tainted by what just transpired. Yes, he was not aware of this, right? But I imagine, you know, Audi Mark is going to be incredibly hurt, because the entire reason for him reintegrating, he didn't even think about it twice. He said, yes, let's
right.
do it. Like, and he
Yeah.
got reintegrated for Gemma. And the fact that now there's a third person involved, he doesn't even have to worry just about Helly and Gemma. Now it's a third thing that he has done. And that even though he wasn't aware, I think with the love story that they have presented for Audi, Mark, and Gemma being such a love that is so profound that he feels like he's choking on her ghost every day is a year, right? A love so profound.
Yeah.
I think that she's going to be hurt. Even if he wasn't aware, how can you not be? Because Irving was right. Like you're rotting somewhere and like he's hooking up with this other person, this whole third person, and Helly too. So Mark essentially has kind of messed up both of those options because now there's even a third person, the trouble.
The throuple. It is a true throuple. It's going to come.
It
It's
was
going to become a
foreshadowing.
quadruple. Yeah, total
Yeah.
foreshadowing. I mean,
Quadruple, yeah.
it's getting nuts now. It is getting nuts now. But yeah, I think he's going to have to make a choice. But like you said, both of them are tainted in a sense already. So maybe the choice won't be his. Maybe he'll end up. I mean, what's Gemma going to do when she finds out about all of this? If he does eventually rescue Gemma and get rid of the Miss Casey persona and actually bring Gemma back, her actual Audi persona, if it's even still there, how is she going to come to terms with all of this? I mean, I imagine Mark's not going to want to be dishonest with her. I imagine he's probably going to have to come clean at some point. It like in one fell swoop, Helena made everything so complicated with her deception.
And it matches who she is as a person. It matches
Yeah.
a Machiavellian person who all they care about is their feelings. All they care about is what they want. No matter how many lives they destroy or how many love stories they ruin, she wanted to get Mark alone and away from the office. And this is what made her happy. This is what she planned. So
Yeah.
it matches her nature as being deceptive. And I know that a lot of people were talking about, well, maybe it's not so bad, and maybe Mark is not gonna mind, but of course he's gonna mind. He's
Yeah.
so in love with Helly,
Yeah.
Mark, and the other one is so in love with Gemma
Yeah.
that of course he's gonna mind that now he has to tell them about something that has happened. Like you wouldn't want to say that, to like the person that has been held hostage in the
Yeah.
basement being experimented on. I mean, come on. Um, Also, it reminds me of the line that was used twice in the episode about love clouding judgment,
Yes.
because that is what you see. Um, Even though realistically, you can think about the fact that he wasn't aware. I imagine for Gemma and Helly, love is like we know, it clouds your judgment. While you may understand something mentally, it doesn't mean that the feelings of being hurt are not going to be there.
Yeah.
You can't talk yourself out of being hurt.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things that, yeah, like you said, you can't just it's not like you can just convince yourself you're not hurt. It's going to be present. It's going to be right there in at the core of your being until you find a way to deal with it eventually, and that usually takes a lot of time. But yeah, I mean, I have to imagine Helly's going to be so hurt here because, like as Forever Autumn says here as well, I fear bad for Helly. Essentially, Helly got robbed of that time she didn't have a choice of being intimate with Mark, and I imagine that with any Mark and any Helly both falling in love with each other, I imagine that's something that Helly will never be able to get back their first time together, which was
Mm.
now tainted with Helena doing what she did. So now, even if Helly and Mark do find a way back to each other, and they do kind of make things work in the end. At the end of the day, she'll always have it in the back of her mind that she was robbed of their first time together by Helena's deception.
Hmm. Yes, forever,
Yes.
Adam. And you bring up an amazing point, and one that is respectable and should be discussed. Not having a choice and being intimate with Mark. We know that
Yeah.
Helly likes Mark, We know that she might even be in love with Mark. However, there is still going to be weird feelings about the fact that now this has happened. That was her physical body, because that is Helly's physical body at the end of the day. When she's an Innie, that is her physical body, and she
Yeah.
didn't have a choice. Now he has experience being with her in a way where she didn't consent.
Yeah.
So now it makes it strange. Yes, you love him, but you didn't have a choice in being with him.
Yeah.
So that's a great point, Forever Autumn.
It is. I mean, it does essentially rob her of something that she'll never be able to get back, which will forever taint their relationship. Again, even if they do end up making it work at some point, she forever stole something from Helly that she'll never be able to get back. So yes, that is a very profound point. I don't know. Thropples ain't good. I don't like the thropples.
No, I
Do
never seen
not like
one
the
work.
thropples. Me
If
neither.
you guys in the chat have ever seen one work, let us know.
Oh man. Yeah, how would a throuple even work? They don't, in my experience. I mean, I don't know. I feel like polygamy just, I don't know. In my opinion, it goes up against, just naturally being in love with one partner, which is what I believe in. I don't know. A
Yeah.
throuple is something I could never do. It's just so, yeah, it's so foreign. I don't think how could it ever really work? I don't know. Maybe some people can, but
Yeah.
not me.
I love how
No way.
you said they don't in my experience. So we are to assume Mr. Jeremy Eisenfire has that experience in troubles.
No, absolutely not. Just from what I've seen. Just from what I've seen. Never. No, no
And what
throuple
we
in my
hear.
yeah. No throuple in my past or future. Thank you very much. No, 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 no. Yeah, it was just such an insane episode. Such an insane episode. And yeah, Milkshake is so full of shit. I really want to like Milkshake. There's times when you see him and you kind of, I don't know, part of me almost wants him to have like a really good redemption arc at some point where he does redeem himself, where he does maybe start to realize that Lumen isn't this, benevolent corporation that he should be loyal to. So while Milchik has been very stern and very steadfast in his loyalty to the company, part of me is hoping that at some point Milchik is going to have a really good redemption arc. At least I hope that's where his storyline goes. Because I kind of like
Mhm.
Milchik. There's aspects of him that I do like.
Well, I like something that you pointed out about this episode. There's a difference in Milkshake. So we might be seeing him turning away from the company. There is a difference in him. And he
Yeah.
wasn't thrilled at Elena and what she was doing, because we know
No.
that he has that beautiful, gorgeous smile, right? And he's usually very excited about doing his job. He does it with excitement. He does the kind eyes, but he almost seemed like it wasn't fully there. He was like
Mhm.
functioning at a 75% when usually he gives it 100. And he
Mhm.
just kept looking at Elena like he was just so annoyed by everything that she was doing, which of course, you would be if you knew not only does she come in pretending to be Helly, but now she's inspiring the Innies to laugh and to be subordinate,
Yes.
like to be
Yeah.
disrespectful. All of the Innies are terrified because they know what happens when you don't behave. You get taken
Mhm.
to the break room. But
Yeah.
of course, Elena, she does not care. So she gets them all to laugh at Mr. Milkshake, and even goes as far as saying, like Mark says, you can't say that. And she's like, that's what he said. He just said that, laughing at
Yeah.
him.
Oh man. Yeah. She really was. Yeah, she was a bit of a troublemaker. She was a bit of an instigator in terms of kind of her just complete disregard of this story. You see Milchik kind of telling the story, and he's hoping that the MDR team is going to take it in a pretty serious and profound way. And yeah, I mean, I get the sense that this scene wasn't acting between them two. I mean, obviously Milchik knows this is Helena. He knows it's not really Helly, but I still feel like he's looking at her in this moment and he is disappointed in her for kind of creating that kind of reaction out of the innies when in what he thought was going to be a more serious moment.
And it brings up the point of who is loyal to the company. he says to her something that I thought was really interesting. He says, "We often laugh at what we don't understand." And he was
Yes.
very, he like takes this very seriously, and he takes his job very seriously. And
Mm.
I imagine that he must be annoyed that he's taking the story seriously. He doesn't laugh at it. He doesn't want the Ennis to laugh. And the person that's actually in the family, the next CEO, is making crude jokes about this horrifying story. And she
Yeah.
is going to inherit this company that he respects, and yet she's so disrespectful to.
She is. It is. I mean, like the way she just bursts out laughing. It's almost like she does have just complete content for all of this, kind of lore that is built up around Kier and presenting him as this, messiah-like figure. It does seem like she almost has just disdain and contempt for it, and it seems like that she's just never really maybe fully bought into that part of the company. Maybe I don't know. But like you mentioned, Milchick very much seems like he believes in the kind of core principles of Lumen. It seems like he does believe in this country, in this company's like mission statement at the end of the day. And yeah, him seeing Helena kind of, getting the innies to react this way to the story, I think he was genuinely irritated at Helena in this moment, like genuinely.
Hmm.
Man.
Yeah, I think you're right, especially when you see the hypocrisy. Because if we remember when Mr. Milkshake was running around firing the Audis, Elena, he asked Elena, "What should I do?" And Elena said, "Let Kier guide you," right? And he took
Yes.
that seriously. And so you assume that she's also quite serious about this. But now he gets to see, not only is she not serious, she's orchestrating this entire thing. I have to put on this white jacket and amazing, gorgeous white furry hat just so that she could hook up with Mark. Like she does not take this seriously.
She doesn't. No, she doesn't. And he did seem like he genuinely was not thrilled with her. Um, yeah, again, I like the character of Milchick. I know he is a little bit villainous at times. The way that he kind of took out Irving at the end of this episode, even though he kind of had to at that point. There are still some aspects of Milchick where I do at times see a possibility for a redemption arc with him. And I would love to see his story do a complete 180 where he starts off similar to Irving did, incredibly loyal to Lumen in all of their core principles, where his storyline will ultimately end with him making a full 180 and helping the Innies and rebelling against the company and helping take down Lumen. I would love to see a redemption arc for Milchick because he is such a fascinating character, and Avery Tillman is so good in the role. Like when he's telling the story, and he starts off with the biggest smile on his face. He's telling a story about the brothers and how we will live as paupers in the woods for the rest of our days. He's got a big smile on his face. And as soon as the story starts to get dark, you see Milchick's face just go blank, like just completely blank. Like he switches from emotions so quick, so easy. And that's not an easy thing to do when you're going from just happy, bright eyed with a big smile going to this just blank stare as you start getting into the darker aspect of the story. And he played it so well. The way he told this story was phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
Man.
And I mean, it is a dark story. It
Yeah.
is a story that, whether it's a metaphor or it's not a metaphor, it's uh, regarding topics that are traumatizing, that are difficult, and that if it was an actual brother, somebody went through. And this happens to be her family. This is her family members, and she's laughing at this. So
Yeah.
um, it all started with the paintings, really. I mean, the company has started to fail him since the last episode by presenting him with the
Yes.
paintings that he was not thrilled about. And
No.
now he has, that's disrespectful in itself. And now he has actual disrespect to his face. One of the Egans laughing at him as she's going around and doing all of these things that are not appropriate and that are, like you stated, they go against Lumen and what they stand for.
Hmm. and he kind of just has to sit there and take it, knowing that she is his boss, knowing she is the next CEO. He kind of just has to sit there and watch her kind of spit in the face of everything he believes in, essentially. So I imagine it is tough for him because he does seem like he does believe in this stuff. But yeah, he's a fascinating character, Mr. Milchick. And yeah, Avery Tillman, so freaking good in this role. Breakout star. I'd love to start seeing him in some more stuff because I really hope that this does break him out into the open where he does start getting more roles on other films or series because he is a really good actor, indeed. Whole cast, like this is such a good cast. So good. So good. Ah, man. But now we look forward to episode 5, which of course is coming in a few days. And yeah, I guess at this point we're going to have to see how is the aftermath going to play out? What exactly is going to happen from here on out? How is the dynamic on the MDR floor going to shift once everybody finds out about everything? Once Helly finds out what Mark did, how is the dynamic on the severed floor going to act? And ultimately, will we see MDR get a new 4th coworker? Because usually whenever a coworker leaves, Petey left, and Mark stepped up as the new boss, and then they got Helly. Now that Irving is gone, I imagine they're going to have to fill that role at some point. So that's what I'm looking forward to in episode 5 and beyond. Are we going to get a new member of the team? And how is the dynamic among the MDR coworkers going to change? Because I imagine it's not going to be the same.
Mm-hmm. I mean, how could it be? How do we go back into the office and the white hallways after we've seen all of this madness?
Crazy. Super crazy. We got Ando for 6 months. What is up, Ando? Thank you for being a member, my friend. For the night is dark and full of terror. It is. This night was dark and full of many different terrors. A very fitting Game of Thrones saying, I guess you could apply to Severance right here for sure. But yeah, such a good episode. Overall, loved it. Definitely my favorite episode of the season so far. And I guess one thing we always like to do at the end here before we close out is ask you guys in the chat, what did you think? How would you guys rate episode 4 of Severance on a scale from 1 to 10, with 1 being horrible and 10 being perfect? What score do you guys give to episode 4? And what about you, PM? Where would you rank this one from 1 to 10?
I mean, it's gonna be 10. It's gonna be 10 because it was amazing. It was like a finale type of episode, and like you stated, I did feel like I was watching a movie. I mean, we just have to honor that. I know that I am usually like I give out high numbers, you guys, but it was amazing. I feel like this is a 10. How about you?
I love this episode. I love the themes woven throughout. I love them diving a little bit deeper into the tempers, which made me think a ton about their true purpose and how they're going to ultimately play out in the story. I gotta give this one. I want to give it a 9, but I almost want to give it a 9.5. I gotta give this one a 9.5. This is the first 9.5 I've given out all season, and this was as close to a perfect episode as I've ever seen. I think the only thing that takes a 0.5 off of it for me is them not experiencing the sensory overload that the innies would have been experiencing, seeing all this stuff for the first time. But that's definitely a nitpick on my part. But such a good episode. Yeah, I got to give it a solid 9.5. Solid
Yeah,
9.5.
I see a lot of 10s. I'm very excited.
I love it. Yeah, we got we got some 10s. We got a lot of 10s, a lot of 9s, which is great to see. We got some more 9s. We got an 8. We got an 8.5. We got a 7. We got a 9. Hell yes. We got a 10 out of 10, another 10, another 9. Awesome stuff. It seems like for the most part, people really did enjoy this episode. So that is great. That is great. What is up, SL Rhodes from the Frumley? I have to watch this just because you're covering it. Well, that is so awesome, my friend. Definitely check it out. It really is such a good show. It dives into so many interesting plots and themes and asks so many profound questions just about life in general. And it does have a little bit of that mystery aspect to it as well that we all have come to know and love from as well. So I would definitely recommend to all From fans, check out the show of Severance. 'Tis worth it. Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. 9 unwashed carrots out of 10. Yeah, what did Dieter's penis end up looking like as it melted off of his body? Jesus, that's the thing. Like
Jesus.
Helena was being so foul. Like, oh man. Like
Yeah.
in
And
hindsight,
that's her family member. That's her
it is.
family.
It's literally her family member that she's making fun of.
When
Absolutely
is
nutty.
that her grandpa? That's her grandpa.
Shit. Uh, yeah. Yeah, overall, great episode. Loved episode 4. Cannot wait to see where they go for episode 5. Loving Severance. And it's great to know that we still have 6 episodes left. I mean, again, the season 2 has really only just started. We haven't even gotten halfway through the season yet. So we still have a ton of Severance to look forward to. We, of course, will be covering every single episode right here on the channel. We'll be going live every Tuesday and every Saturday night, diving into all of the latest and greatest that Severance has to offer. And of course, our little pregame shows that we do on Thursday night as well. So I am loving it. It's been so fun covering the show with everybody. It is awesome to see all of the From names that have kind of come here from. We came off From, and it was just a phenomenal season in season 3. And we had, we were seeing record numbers for the most part. And I love how we're seeing so many members of the Fromily come over here and watching Severance now, because I imagine there's a lot of crossover there. I imagine people who like From, you're probably going to find something in Severance you like too.
Yes. And also, you guys, Jeremy makes the best From Severance connection. So if you're from the family, you're gonna love being a Sevy. Like check out today's video. If you haven't seen it, it's a great one. And there's a From connection in there. One that I know you're gonna love, including
There
Face.
is. There is. Yeah, something in this episode profoundly reminded me of a very particular scene in the finale of From season 3, where Irving sacrificing himself reminded me of a very interesting scene from. So if you haven't seen my video that I dropped today, definitely check that one out as I dive into episode 4, and I also dive a little bit deeper into the 4 tempers and what I think they might ultimately mean on the show. So check that out if you haven't already. But I want to thank everybody for joining us on this fine Saturday night evening. And again, we'll be live again right here, same time, same place next week, right here on the channel, Saturday, 9 p.m. Eastern, as we dive into episode 5 at that point, as we see how exactly this aftermath is going to shake out. Should be interesting. It should be interesting. But I want to give a big thank you to everybody again for joining us. And of course, a huge thank you to my wonderful co-host, the great PM Philosophy. If you guys have not subscribed to her channel already, definitely give her a sub. The link to her channel is in the description of this stream. All you got to do is click it. That'll take you right to her channel. And I would also recommend checking out her latest Irving video. She had a really good Irving video that points into where I think they're going to be going with Irving's Audi character and who he might ultimately be. So definitely sub to PM if you guys haven't already. And big thank you to each and every one of you for joining us on this fine evening. But stay safe out there, guys, in this crazy unsevered world that we find ourselves living in. Keep those tinfoil hats on, folks, and we will see you on the next one.